The night we buried my father, the world felt colder than I'd ever known. As mourners faded into shadows and the last car pulled away from our Denver driveway, my Aunt Margaret reached for me with trembling hands. She pressed an old brass key into my palm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't trust anyone. Not even your mother. Not even Ethan." Her eyes, haunted, desperate, locked with mine for a split second before she let go. I wanted to believe it was just grief twisting her words, but that night, sleep wouldn't come. The house creaked with secrets. I waited until everyone was lost in their own sorrow, then slipped up the attic stairs, heart pounding like a warning bell. The old lockbox was right where she said it would be, tucked behind boxes of Christmas lights and forgotten memories. The key fit perfectly. My hand shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, a faded contract, a stack of banking statements, and a family photograph, my face ripped straight down the middle. My mother's handwriting crawled across the edge, "For your eyes only." In that instant, a chill cut through me. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, began to unravel. By dawn, the truth was impossible to ignore. My inheritance was vanishing. And the people I loved most were behind it. As the sun rose over Denver, I realized I had only one choice: disappear before they erased me for good. I didn't run that morning, not yet. Instead, I forced myself to act normal, slipping into my usual seat at the breakfast table. My mother poured coffee like she had every morning since I was a child, but now, every gesture seemed calculated. Ethan scrolled through his phone, barely glancing at me. My aunt sat quietly, eyes fixed on her cup, as if bracing herself for a storm only we could sense. Inside, my mind spun with the documents I'd read, the names, the numbers, the legal jargon all pointing in one direction. I was being erased from my own story. I excused myself early, claiming work. Instead, I drove across town to the one person left who might still be on my side, Ronald Hayes, my father's old friend and the family's former attorney. His office hadn't changed in decades, filled with the scent of old books and tobacco. When he saw the contract and the banking records, he went silent, reading every line twice. Finally, he looked up at me with a gravity that made my stomach twist. "Alex," he said, "they've been planning this for years. But there are gaps, mistakes. If we move quickly, we can challenge them. But you have to be careful. People who steal from their own family don't stop at lies." The words echoed in my head as I left his office. I gripped my steering wheel, knuckles white, breathing through panic. At home, I hid the evidence where no one would find it, then joined my family for dinner as if nothing had changed. But nothing felt the same. That night, I began digging deeper. Old emails, safe deposit box keys, cryptic notes my father had left behind, all pieces of a puzzle I was desperate to solve before my own life was signed away like a forgotten contract. Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the old house sent my heart racing. I replayed Ronald's warning over and over: people who steal from their own family don't stop at lies. So I slipped quietly from my room, phone flashlight in hand, and went searching for anything my father might have hidden, answers tucked between the past and the present. In the hallway closet, beneath a stack of faded winter coats, I found a battered shoebox wrapped in electrical tape. Inside were receipts, coded notes, and a thumb drive labeled simply, "If found, ask Margaret." I didn't hesitate. I tiptoed to my aunt's room and gently knocked. She opened the door, eyes already wet, as if she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. I handed her the drive and the box. She nodded, ushering me inside, and quietly locked the door behind us. Her hands trembled as she slid the drive into her laptop. For a moment, the screen filled with static, then a video began to play. My father's voice filled the room. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "If you're watching this, something has gone wrong," he began. "Trust is a fragile thing in this family. There are things you were never meant to see, but now you must." As the video continued, he revealed hidden bank accounts, coded transfers, and forged signatures, proof that my mother and Ethan had been siphoning off my inheritance, laundering money through shell companies, even tying my name to debts I never knew existed. My chest tightened with each new revelation. My father's face, so familiar, so worn, seemed to plead with me through the screen. Alex, don't let them take everything. Not just the money, your life, your story. I've left you what I could. Trust Margaret. She's always been on your side. The video ended. My aunt squeezed my hand, silent tears streaming down her face. In that quiet attic room, I realized the only way forward was to become the kind of woman my father believed I could be, a fighter, not a victim. And as the first light crept through the curtains, I knew my battle had just begun. The next morning, my resolve had sharpened into something fierce. I watched Ethan leave for the gym, always at the same time, like clockwork. My mother retreated to her home office, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and clipped. I poured a cup of coffee, my hand steady now, and made my way to the garage, where the family's old files were kept in locked cabinets. Margaret met me there, key already in hand. She glanced around, then nodded, and together we opened the battered metal cabinet. Inside were decades' worth of paperwork, deeds, loan agreements, tax returns. Buried near the bottom, we found a thin red folder marked only with my father's initials. Inside, a notarized letter, a list of account numbers, and several black and white photographs. One caught my breath, a picture of my father, Ethan, and Frank Donovan shaking hands outside a Las Vegas hotel. On the back, my father had scrawled a date and one chilling phrase, start of the end. I scanned the letter, Margaret reading over my shoulder. My father described a business partnership gone bad, threats made against him and against me. He wrote about changes to his will, changes he feared my mother would never accept. If anything happens to me, trust Margaret. Follow the money. And Alex, don't let them rewrite your future. Suddenly, Margaret froze. Her finger hovered over a line of small print at the bottom of the letter, an address in Las Vegas and a key code. This isn't just about Denver, she whispered. Whatever they started, it crossed state lines. If we find what's there, we might finally have leverage. For the first time since my father's funeral, hope sparked in my chest. I snapped photos of every page, then tucked the originals into Margaret's purse. We closed the cabinet and returned to the house, masks back on, playing the part of oblivious daughter and harmless aunt. But beneath the surface, a new alliance had formed. And the deeper we dug, the more dangerous this web of secrets would become. 2 days later, Margaret and I set out before dawn, a rental car humming quietly down the highway, Denver's mountains shrinking in the rearview. I watched the sun rise over endless miles of asphalt, wondering how many secrets had been buried between here and Las Vegas. Margaret kept the red folder clutched in her lap the whole way, her gaze hard, jaw set with determination. "We're not running," she said, her voice steady. "We're going to end this." I nodded, heart pounding as I thought about the address and key code, about Frank Donovan, the man in the photograph, the partner my father once trusted. We reached Las Vegas by mid-afternoon, neon lights already flickering to life as we pulled into a quiet side street, far from the glitz and noise. The address led us to an old storage facility on the city's edge. I punched in the code. The heavy door slid open, revealing a small, windowless unit. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. Against the far wall sat a steel safe and a battered desk, covered in folders and a single, faded photograph, my father standing beside Frank, their faces tense. Margaret found a set of keys taped to the underside of the desk. My hand shook as I opened the safe. Stacks of documents, ledgers, flash drives, everything carefully labeled. There were bank records showing massive wire transfers, corporate seals from shell companies, even signed affidavits implicating my mother, Ethan, and Frank Donovan in a conspiracy to siphon off millions. But the real shock came when I found a sealed envelope addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sentence. "If you're reading this, Alex, then you already know who you can't trust. Protect Margaret. And never forget, you're stronger than you think." Tears burned in my eyes, but I swallowed them. I copied every document, every file, and stashed the originals in Margaret's bag. We left no trace. By the time we stepped back into the neon night, I felt the world shift. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I was fighting for my father's name, for the truth, and for every future they tried to steal. And I knew, when we returned to Denver, we'd be ready for war. We made it back to Denver under cover of darkness, exhaustion hanging heavy in the car. But I barely slept that night, too many possibilities, too much at stake. Margaret and I pored over the evidence until dawn, building a timeline, connecting names, transfers, signatures. Piece by piece, the true scale of the betrayal came into focus. It wasn't just about our family's fortune anymore. This was organized, sprawling, and deadly. By sunrise, I realized our window was closing. If Ethan or my mother sensed we were onto them, they'd destroy whatever evidence was left. So I called Lisa, my old college friend, the one person I trusted with a secret this size. She showed up an hour later, her laptop already open, her mind racing faster than my own. As Margaret briefed her, I took a risk. I called Ronald Hayes and told him everything, every detail, every name, every document. He listened in stunned silence, then promised to prepare an emergency motion with the DA's office. But Alex, he warned, they're going to panic. Don't do anything alone. Don't underestimate what fear can make people do. I thanked him, adrenaline turning my voice cold. Lisa's fingers flew across her keyboard, hacking into encrypted drives, tracing emails that linked Ethan and Frank to offshore accounts. She found deleted messages, threats, coded language, even a payment for what looked like a job in Las Vegas, scheduled the same week my father died. A chill went through me. It was all connected. My father's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a plan. Margaret handed me her phone, her face pale. "It's your mother," she whispered. "She's asking where we've been all weekend. She knows something's wrong." I met Margaret's eyes. "No more hiding. It's time," I said quietly. "Tonight, we end their game." As the sun dipped below the Rockies, I steeled myself for the confrontation I'd been avoiding all my life. No more secrets. No more fear. Just truth, and whatever came after. That evening, the house felt like a stage set for disaster. Shadows stretched long across the polished floors as Margaret and I prepared dinner, the air thick with secrets about to spill. Ethan arrived first, dropping his gym bag in the foyer, eyes darting as if he sensed the shift. My mother swept in minutes later, all composure and icy charm, her gaze locking onto me just a bit too long. We sat together at the table, a picture-perfect family on the outside, a battlefield underneath. I forced myself to smile, to make small talk, my heart hammering beneath my ribs. Margaret barely touched her food. Lisa, who'd joined us at my invitation, kept her phone hidden under the table, ready to record everything. Halfway through the meal, I slid a folder onto the table. "I think it's time we talked about what happened in Las Vegas," I said, my voice steady but cold. Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mother's lips tightened. "What is this, Alex?" she asked, her voice sharp, calculated. "Proof," I said, flipping open the folder to reveal copies of the documents, the wire transfers, the photographs. "Proof that you've both been stealing from me for years. Proof that Dad's death wasn't an accident." For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and Margaret's shaky breath. Lisa pressed record on her phone. My mother tried to laugh it off, but her eyes flickered with panic. "You've always been dramatic, Alex. You're making things up." I shook my head. "I have everything. The contracts, the emails, even the payment for the accident in Las Vegas. The authorities know. Ronald Hayes is filing a motion with the DA right now." Ethan pushed his chair back, anger blooming across his face. "You're ruining this family, over nothing but jealousy." "No," I replied, my voice like ice. "You ruined it the day you decided money mattered more than blood." My mother's mask finally cracked. Her hand shook as she reached for a glass of wine. "You don't know what you're doing, Alex." "Yes, I do," I said quietly, locking eyes with her. "And I'm not afraid of you anymore." In that moment, I saw their power slip away. The walls they'd built with lies and secrets started to crumble, right there at the dinner table. For the first time, I felt truly free. But I also knew the fight wasn't over. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, I was ready to win. The hours that followed blurred into a storm of panic and confrontation. Ethan stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. My mother retreated to her office, phone pressed tight to her ear, voice hissing in frantic whispers. Margaret hovered by my side, her hand trembling as she checked the locks and closed the blinds. Lisa pulled me aside, her face pale. "They're making calls, Alex. Lots of them." I just intercepted an email. Ethan reached out to Frank Donovan. "He's trying to move whatever's left before the authorities freeze the accounts." My heart thudded. This was it, the endgame. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, a black SUV parked across the street. Lisa noticed it first, snapping photos through the curtains. "That's not a neighbor," she whispered. "I think they're watching the house." Before fear could take over, Ronald Hayes called. His voice was urgent. "Alex, the judge signed the emergency order. But you need to stay somewhere safe tonight. Ethan and your mother aren't acting alone. There's an active investigation into organized crime. Frank Donovan's been flagged by federal agents for months. We're linking your father's death to a series of suspicious incidents in both Colorado and Nevada." The world spun. Everything I'd discovered was bigger than I'd feared. It wasn't just about inheritance or even murder. It was about decades of power, greed, and a network that would do anything to protect itself. Margaret packed a bag in minutes. Lisa pulled up an address, an old friend of my father's, someone he once trusted implicitly. We slipped out the back door, hearts pounding, the storm masking our escape. As we sped away into the night, rain streaking down the windshield, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't running from my family. I was running toward the truth, with allies beside me who refused to let fear win. And deep down, I knew, the more they tried to hide, the closer I was to burning their entire empire down. We drove through the rain-slicked streets, headlights cutting through the darkness, until Lisa pulled into a quiet driveway on the edge of town. The house belonged to Mr. Carter, my father's oldest friend, a man I barely remembered but whose handshake my father always trusted. Inside, the air was thick with worry and old wood. Carter welcomed us with steady eyes, locking the doors behind us. Margaret explained everything in hushed tones. Carter nodded, then disappeared into his study, returning moments later with a locked box. "Your father left this with me the week before he died," he said quietly. "He said if anything ever happened to him, you'd come looking for answers." My hand shook as I turned the key. Inside were journals, USB drives, and a sealed envelope addressed to Margaret. I scanned the first journal, my father's familiar handwriting recounting business meetings, threats, and names I'd seen in the Vegas files, names tied to Ethan, my mother, Frank Donovan, and others I never knew existed. Suddenly, Lisa's phone buzzed. "Alex, look," she gasped. On the news, breaking coverage of a federal raid at one of Frank Donovan's companies in Nevada. Multiple arrests. Assets seized. Names scrolling across the screen, Ethan's among them. Just then, Carter's landline rang. A crisp voice introduced herself as Agent Parker from the FBI. "We need to speak with Alex Morgan immediately," she said. "We've connected the dots on your family's case. But you need to know, there's another layer. Someone you trust may not be who they seem." A chill shot through me. The room spun. Had we been betrayed again? Agent Parker arrived within the hour, briefcase in hand, her eyes sharp. She reviewed the journals, scanned the Vegas files, then slid a photograph across the table, a surveillance image of Margaret meeting secretly with Frank Donovan 6 months ago. I looked at Margaret, searching for answers. Her face crumpled. "I did what I had to do to protect you," she whispered. "Frank threatened to ruin us both if I didn't cooperate. But everything I've done since was for you, Alex. I swear it." My world rocked, but Agent Parker's next words broke the silence. "Tonight, we bring down the entire operation. But Alex, you need to decide, can you forgive Margaret, or will this be the final fracture in your family's legacy? And as the storm outside faded, I realized the real cost of truth wasn't just justice. It was learning who deserved a place in my future, and who had to be left behind. The hours that followed unfolded in a blur. FBI agents swarmed the city, collecting evidence, questioning suspects, freezing accounts across 3 states. Agent Parker asked me to review statements, to confirm names and signatures I'd memorized in nightmares. Lisa stayed by my side, translating tech jargon into plain truth, her faith in me unshakable. Margaret paced the hallway, wringing her hands, her confession hanging in the air like a storm cloud. By sunrise, the news was everywhere: Morgan family scandal, inheritance, betrayal, and arrests. Ethan was picked up at the airport, caught with forged documents and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. My mother, cornered by the weight of evidence, finally broke, signing a full confession in exchange for leniency. Frank Donovan's empire collapsed overnight. But justice, I learned, doesn't heal everything. As I watched Margaret sign her own statement, I saw the pain etched in her face, a lifetime spent trying to protect me, her mistakes driven by fear as much as love. Agent Parker pulled me aside. "You can press charges," she said gently. "Or you can let her go. She's been a witness and a victim in her own way. This choice is yours." I stared at Margaret, remembering every kindness, every secret warning. My chest ached with the weight of it all. "You kept me alive, even if it meant making deals with the devil," I said softly. "But now, I need honesty. If you want a place in my life, it has to be real." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No more secrets. I promise." The court proceedings began that afternoon. The evidence spoke for itself. Ethan and my mother were convicted of conspiracy and fraud. Frank Donovan faced federal charges. The family fortune, for all its blood and pain, would be distributed as my father intended. And when the final gavel fell, I stood in the courthouse lobby, free for the first time. Lisa squeezed my shoulder, Agent Parker offered a rare smile, and Margaret waited quietly, ready to begin again, if I let her. I realized then, true justice isn't just about punishment. It's about deciding who you want by your side as you build what comes next. For the first time in months, I woke to silence that felt peaceful, not threatening. The sun streamed through my window, and for a long moment, I just lay there, breathing in the freedom I'd fought so hard to reclaim. The headlines had shifted, from scandal and betrayal to resilience and restitution. With Margaret and Lisa beside me, I began the slow, uncertain work of rebuilding, not just the family fortune, but the meaning behind it. I met with Mr. Carter and Agent Parker to transfer the recovered assets into a new foundation, one that honored my father's real legacy, helping families in crisis, funding scholarships for young women in law, and supporting organizations that protected the vulnerable. Days blurred into weeks as I untangled the legal knots my mother and Ethan had tied for years. I visited the charity my father once supported, reading stories of children he'd quietly helped. For the first time, I saw my inheritance not as a burden, but as a tool for healing. Margaret, true to her word, kept nothing from me. She told me the hard truths about my father's final days, the threats he'd faced, the promises he'd made. There were tears, sometimes anger, but gradually, forgiveness took root. We found ourselves laughing over old memories, planting a new kind of trust. Lisa became more than a friend, she was my anchor. Together, we pored over every contract, every signature, determined to make sure no one else could ever steal my story again. As fall settled over Denver, I hosted a dinner, not one for appearances, but for family chosen, not given. Mr. Carter, Lisa, Margaret, a handful of people my father had helped, sat around my table. The air was warm with possibility, no secrets left to spoil the meal. That night, as laughter filled the house, I realized, revenge had ended, but restoration was just beginning. My scars weren't gone, but they no longer defined me. I raised my glass and offered a silent thank you, to my father, to the truth, and to the future I was finally free to choose. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the past loosened its grip on my life. The old mansion felt lighter, its shadows chased away by new beginnings and honest laughter. I spent long afternoons walking the city streets, rediscovering Denver as my own, no longer haunted by secrets or shame. Margaret, humbled by truth and forgiveness, began volunteering at the foundation we'd built in my father's name. Lisa launched a digital security program to protect other families from the kind of fraud that nearly destroyed mine. Even Mr. Carter, who had weathered storms beside my father, found new purpose advising families on how to safeguard their legacies. Sometimes, memories would catch me off guard, my father's quiet encouragement, my mother's ambition twisted by fear, the nights I felt utterly alone. But those memories no longer controlled me. They became stepping stones, reminders of how far I'd come. One crisp autumn morning, I received a letter from a young woman the foundation had helped, a girl whose family was saved from eviction because of a single grant. She wrote, "You taught me that even when people hurt us, we can become stronger. Thank you for not giving up." I sat in my father's old study, sunlight warming the desk, and realized that true justice is never just about exposing the darkness. It's about what you do with the light that follows. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle, they had shaped me, but they did not define me. I chose to turn my family's darkest chapters into hope for others. As the first snow fell, I gathered my chosen family, Margaret, Lisa, Mr. Carter, and the foundation's first beneficiaries, around the dinner table. We toasted to courage, to second chances, to building something that would outlast all of us. And as laughter filled the house, I finally understood my father's last lesson. We cannot control what others do to us, but we can choose who we become because of it. That is how legacies are truly made. If my story moved you, share it. Someone else out there might need the hope I found. And if you want more true stories of survival and redemption, click the next video. Your journey is just beginning.